how in the world did I forget who I really was? It was a complete ecstasy. It was complete euphoria. Man, that was rough duty. That place was gnarly. All those things, like those low emotions like anger and jealousy and rage, those things didn't exist. It was just pure delightful existence. My near-death experience was a kind of a tour. It was leaving the earth realm and kind of shooting through that heavenly realm and getting a feel for what we really are, these incredible beings, infinite, eternal beings, incredibly powerful, incredibly wise and kind.
I'd like to welcome to the show, Bill Letson. How you doing, Bill?
Hi, Alex. I'm doing great. Thanks.
Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your remarkable journey with all of us. I am looking forward to getting into your near-death experience and your adventures on the other side. But before we jump into that, what was your life like prior to having your near-death experience?
It was pretty normal. I grew up here in California, the Central Coast, and I was an athlete and stuff, surfer, and found firefighting. I just fell in love with it. And, that was in my teens. And then I just kept getting more and more jobs, hot shots and engines and backcountry stuff, and got on with Santa Barbara County Fire Department. And, I was there for, 10 years. And that's when I had my NDE in 94.
Were you a spiritual person or a religious person prior to the NDE?
I was raised Catholic, and, that kind of throws a bucket of water on the spirituality thing at times. And, I kind of realized that everyone was just going through the motions there on Sunday. And we were in a big house, and, you can, from my life with the Forest Service and outdoors and surfing, that's where I was connected to, the divine. That's where I found peace and spirituality. So, I figured that we'll live this life and do the best you can, and there's more after it. And somebody made all this, but all the dogma and doctrine and rituals, it's not really necessary. That's what I came to.
So you were quote unquote spiritual, at least in the sense that you knew there was something bigger than yourself out there, that someone made this, something made all of this. And when we die, it doesn't end. Something goes on. But that was it's as far as you went.
Yeah, something goes on, and, and we get to paint the picture, and that's kind of what I felt. But
so what led up to to your near-death experience? What happened in that day before you started going to the other side?
I was working at a station down in Santa Barbara, Station 11, and there was a flu epidemic going on. We had those bad flu years, and it was a good one, and it was filling up the hospitals and the emergency rooms. And we ran on one patient, and she had really gone far. She was circling the drain by the time we got to her. And we jumped into action, and I, with everything that we do, putting O2 on her and getting vitals, she exhaled and I inhaled, and I took her breath straight in. And I was like, oh man, I could feel her hot breath go down into my lungs. Yeah, everybody cringes when they think of that.
Well, this is post-COVID, so.
Yeah. Yeah, and we got her to the hospital, and successful. She came home in a week or something. But a couple of days after I had my, got that inoculation, I was really sick, and it came on pretty fast the next day, and just had this racing heart and this tanking blood pressure, and I was dehydrating, and before you knew it, I was circling the drain, and I called for help, and my department came, and, a local ambulance company came, and they picked me up, got me in an ambulance, got some IVs started, because I was severely dehydrated. and got me to the local hospital. And the place was full of people, full of kids, full of adults, people suffering from this flu. And they put me in a room, and they were kind of overwhelmed. And they came in and gave me something. They injected it into the the IV port, the injection port on the IV line. And the girls, she's a great nurse, but they were flustered. And so she pushed it in like all the way in. And my wife was there, and she said, your eyes rolled back and you just keeled over straight back and you were gone, and they couldn't get you back, and they could barely get a blood pressure. So I didn't come back, and they put me into intensive care with, a couple of IVs and head down. And I just kind of hovered there at, a blood pressure that was like 40 over 0 for hours. And at some point during that night, 2, 3 in the morning, something like that, I left my body. And did you want me to go right into that part, or did you?
Yeah. So when no, that's fine. So did you like leave your body in the sense that you were in the room, or did you go somewhere else right away?
I found myself in a star-filled realm. It was just all of these stars, these colorful orbs, and I was parading through them, and it was all good vibes and beautiful stars, orbs, I guess we call them. And I was just, it was a complete ecstasy. It was complete euphoria. It felt like I'd been let out of a hot, dark, stuffy closet, and I'd been stuck there. And I was now this huge expanded cloud, just sailing through this welcoming party of stars. And I felt like somebody was pouring honey all over my brain, all over and it was running down through all my nerves. And it was like this, I have not been ashamed to use this word, but it was like a cosmic orgasm. And it just kept going. It was just the standing wave of absolute euphoria. And I was thinking, man, that was rough duty. That place was gnarly. This earth. And, all those things like those low emotions like anger and jealousy and rage, those things didn't exist. It was just pure, delightful existence. And as I flew along through all these stars, I was thinking, how in the world did I forget who I really was? How is it that I was absolutely convinced, immersed in this dude that I was pretending to be, this Bill Letson? And he had this whole story, and he had his likes and dislikes, and he had, all this stuff, and all of it was like it was pretend. It was like it was just something I was doing, like a game. And I didn't want, going back to that was out of the question. There's no way. I was free, and I was absolutely stoked. So I flew along for a while, and then, and everything was awesome. And it's like this, the moment is constantly the same thing of, oh, wow, this is so cool. Everything is new and absolutely stoked in each moment. So I was flying along, I could do this forever. This is awesome. And then I landed in a place that was solid. There was indirect lighting. There was equipment there. There were beds. It was a solid place. And right in front of me were 3 beings. And they were these short little hooded guys with big smiles on their face. And they were bouncing around and giggling. And I was trying to sort out, well, where am I now? This was a complete change in, everything. that was it was in a structure. And they were looking at me, and they were giggling, and they were saying things like, "How was it? What did you learn? What can you tell us?" And I was just kind of looking at them like, "Where is it? What is this place? And who? You guys are very strange looking." And they looked exactly like that. Those guys in the movie Communion, where Christopher Walken goes in, and there's a lot of people, when they see that, they see demons or something, but they weren't. They were just these cool little munchkins, and they were giggling, and they were happy to see me. And if you watch that movie Communion, they're actually pretty playful, joyful guys. They don't do anything that is really upsetting. Once Christopher Walken controls his fear of the situation, once he gets used to, this is something phenomenal, but it's not menacing. So one of them came forward and looked me up and down, and he turned to the other two, and he goes, "He doesn't remember us." And they started giggling uproariously, bouncing around and stuff. And I was like, "Guys, I kind of remember you, but this is very unusual here." And then there was this other guy, and he was in the background at first. He was this tall, wispy guy, and he had this I've called him like a trimmed up Gumby, and like a walking stick. And he had this huge smile on his face. His eyes were bright, and he was absolutely stoked. You could feel the love coming off of him towards me. And he had this like weird spinning energy, like you were, like if you took a glass of water and spun it and then looked at the vortex there, the spinning. That's what he looked like. And it looked like when he came forward, it was like I was looking at somebody underwater. And, the top part would move first, and then the other parts would sort of catch up, and then he'd become whole again, and he kept moving. And as he came closer, I just felt my chest just expanding and my throat tightening. And I felt like I was going to break down in uncontrollable crying from love. There was so much love coming from this being that it was paralyzing. It was overwhelming. And then, we went back and forth with some different small talk stuff. And every time I said anything, he just chuckled. He just would crack up like he was looking at a little toddler, and he was amused by his little toddler. And after a while, the little guys were just giggling, and he was just chuckling at everything. And I said, well, there's not, this isn't very organized. There's not much going on. Do we go and make do a review of my life? Is that what's next? Do you guys want to get started with that? And the tall, wispy guy just cracked up, and he was just chuckling, and he thought that was hysterical that this little toddler was, trying to take over. But he said, sure, let's do that. How do you want to start? And so I told a few stories about, jobs that my wife and I got offered a job on off the coast of California on this island. And I took a fire job, but she really wanted that. And she said, when are we going to get a chance to live on an island by ourselves? And, but I was, 20, 22, something. I said, I'm not going to do well alone on an island at this age. And I need action. I need to be around fire guys. But now that I'm almost 70, I look back and I say, I wish I had done that for her, because she wanted it, and she's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
So I talked for a while. I told a couple of different things. Nobody was listening. They weren't paying attention. They were doing the same thing. They were doing these playful, joyful things with each other, and a lot of chuckling and giggling. And then he just turns to me and he goes, "Okay, that's enough. Time to go back." And that floored me. That I was shocked at that. And I was like, "Go back?" I go, "No way. I cannot go back there. That you don't understand. That place is rough duty." And he's like, "No, you got to go back. You got things to do." And you're going back. And as he came forward, I pleaded. I told him I was almost 40. What good am I? My life's pretty much over. There's not much I can do after 40. And he laughed at that, just like you. And and I said some other things. I said, "Hey, I got lots of friends, lots of bros, but the only people that are really going to get stung by me not coming back is my wife and my parents. But they are strong people. They will persevere." And he thought that was funny. And he said, "Okay, now you're going back." And he came forward and the place just started to break up. It started to dematerialize. He evaporated in front of me and the room came apart. And I dropped in frequency, and I dropped away, and I was on my way to another channel, another dimension, another stop. And it was a very, it was a drop in frequency. It didn't feel good as I was moving back to this place. And I got close to my body, and it was a dark place. It was lonely. It was dismal. And he didn't want to be there. And, we talk about, heaven and in between place and earth, and then another place. And, from that experience, I believe that other place is right close to where we are here in the physical. And I think that's part of our thing, where we need to navigate that successfully when we come out of our bodies. That whole thing about the valley of the shadow of death. Without fear, we have to move through that into the higher planes. But anyway, I was back in my body, and I woke up a few times, 4 or 5 in the morning, and I was looking at the equipment, and it was the vital signs. The things were improving with each round, and they take your vitals. And I could stay awake after a while. It was still dark out, and I was looking around, and the nurse came by, and she was shocked. She's like, "You're awake?" And I'm like, "Yes, I am. I need to talk to you." And she said, "Well, I need to go tell a doctor. We've been worried all night. We didn't know what was going on with you, where this was going." And I said, "Okay, you can go get the doctor. But first, what am I doing back here?" I was pissed, and I wanted to verbalize that, I guess. And I said, I was home. I was home with my best bros. I was back where I belong. I had died. I had bought the farm. I was sure of it. And she had her hands on my shoulders, and she was saying, "He's just old nurse, seen it all." And she goes, "Honey, you've been in escrow, and you fell out of escrow, and now you're back with us, and you're going to have to get your head around that." And she said it very, genuinely. She sort of spoke to my soul. And I never forgot that, because I had just come back from this experience. And, a lot of your guests will tell you that it's devastating. And, they can go into depressions for months and years. And, addiction can come with that. And we are so cut off from what we really are here in, in this illusionary, this journey. But, and then everybody came by, and I was just la 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 blah 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 blah. The big guy, the tall guy, the little guys, and they were my best friends. And it was like I just got off a roller coaster, and they wanted to know what it was about. And you know, you see disappointment in your family's faces, and you know, the doctor tells you outright you're crazy. And so I was home for a few days, and then recovering, and then I got back to work, and the guys all wanted to know. It's like, hey, dude, something happened to you. Everyone's talking about it. And I'm like, well, yeah, I'll tell you what happened. And I didn't leave anything out. And, you know, the very religious guys, whatever their religion, you know, they didn't want to hear much more of the story once I got to the short little guys, because it wasn't fitting their robes and harps and beards. And and I always thought that was really interesting, because they were, you know, they are such good people, but they wanted nothing to do with this sort of unusual story. And so I told the story for a while, and then the word kind of leaked down from the office, hey, you better stop telling that story, because, you know, we don't have kooks riding our fire engines. And that made sense. And I'm like, yeah, I get it. And so I zipped it, and I dummied up for about 15 years. But, you know, it was my thing. It was absolutely real. And whenever I was in a bookstore, I would, you know, tiptoe into the woo-woo section and see if I could find some answers. The Tolle books were excellent. And, you know, when DMT, the spirit molecule, when I read that was, you know, that was a shocker, because, and that was after retirement, about 2011. That was a shocker because, you know, his volunteers, Rick Strassman's work at the New Mexico University with, you know, injecting his volunteers with DMT and then recording where they go, what they experience. They were seeing the same thing. They were going to a very clinical place, like a facility, and seeing these short little playful guys and a taller guy that's in charge, seemed to be in charge, but wasn't an authoritarian at all. And, you know, there's a lot of videos out there on my story, and these kids that smoke DMT, they'll write and say, you just explained my DMT breakthrough story to the letter. And that's an interesting thing. When you look at Strassman's book, and, you know, what these kids that are smoking DMT and getting this powerful, you know, the soul is rocketed into another, you know, another dimension, another realm. And they say it's very playful. And the guys are, sometimes they hear things like, you're doing it wrong. You're not, you know, you're not supposed to take this shortcut.
Well, let me ask you this real quick. All right. So when you were with the little guys and the tall, thin guy, you said, do you want a life review? How did you understand that concept? Had you heard that concept before, or did you just literally, do you want me to just tell you my life story?
Yeah, I had that concept in my conscious thoughts. Okay. And it came forward. So
it just popped into your consciousness at that moment.
No, I have heard it. I had heard it, you know, like I said, I would visit the woo-woo section in the bookstore and stuff. So I did hear
before
that
before the near-death experience, or after the near-death experience?
Well, I was always kind of that way.
Okay.
But after it became more of a, you know, this is real. These people aren't wasting their time with these, you know, accounts and stuff. It's a real thing. We really don't know what we are.
Right.
And so.
Well, Bill, let me ask you, because I mean, as you know, I've probably spoken to over 100 near-death experiencers at this point. You're the first is given me the details you've given me with the little guys. And the tall guy I've heard before, it's versions of him. I never heard the version of the little guy before, which these little guys who obviously look different than humans. They look, weird considering, comparing to us and our perception. So you're the first I've heard that from. But what I find interesting is that people going through DMT, their account is similar to your account. So it seems, and I've done a lot of research in psychedelics, and it's almost like a shortcut. The DMT is a shortcut to go to where you went to. You did it the hard way. You had to die, essentially, to get there. But it's really fascinating how your trip went. And I call it a trip because it wasn't a rough exit or a rough entrance back. You just kind of like almost was very like, I'm out, I'm back in, I don't want to be here. It's pretty fascinating. Is there any other details of the actual experience that you can give us? What did the room look like? What did you look like? Did you look at yourself? Anything like that?
I did not look at myself. I just assumed I was me, but I don't know what they were looking at. They definitely were looking at something. And this whole thing with, having eyes and speaking, I'm not so sure anybody was speaking anything. It was,
right.
People say it's all telepathy. It's all absolute, honest, open communication. So there wasn't really a, gathering of your thoughts before you spoke. It just came out. If you thought it, they heard it, type of thing. So as far as details, there's so I'll say this. I believe that my near-death experience was a kind of a tour. It was leaving the earth realm and kind of shooting through that heavenly realm and getting a feel for what we really are, these incredible beings, infinite, eternal beings, incredibly powerful, incredibly wise and kind. And then there was I left that heavenly realm, that heavenly dimension, and I was at this in-between place. And if you see the movie Astral City, it's a story of this guy in Brazil who was a famous medium, and he told this whole story of this Astral City where we, there's a clinic, there's a rehab place. Everything is emotional trauma. Once we leave this place, that's what we're carrying. We're carrying feelings, and the negative feelings need to be cleansed and healed. And so you'll go to this clinic, and then you'll go back out into the city. And, John Davis has his NDE. He talks about this tour of the city with these libraries and, and I had a medium contact me, and she goes, "Oh, I know exactly where you were. The steps lead down to this grassy area, and then you can go out into the city." And she's like, "I'm there all the time." So she knows about this astral plane, and, it seems to be a recurring thing. And, life is pretty good there. And
sounds like
we're there. We're there to learn about this place. There's all these different, like John Davis talks about, there's all these different aspects of learning. And then we come into lives and we forget absolutely everything about who we are and where we came from. And we have these lives and we learn from them. And then we go back.
Bill, why do you think this happened to you?
I think, I think, when he said, you have to go back, you have things to do and they're important. And I think it's going on right now. These, the last year and a half, these podcasts have gone crazy. The number of people calling me that want to talk to me and stuff. I was telling my story. I got mixed up with the IONS groups, and they were incredibly helpful. And I'd go around and tell my story at their meetings all over the place. And that was very therapeutic for me. And then this whole podcast thing came out of COVID, and all of a sudden people are interested in NDE. It's like taken off like wildfire. And, I ask all you guys, I don't think I asked you before we started, but I ask everyone that I talk to, what brought you to do these interviews and ask people about NDEs? And every one of them says, well, it's just really an important thing. I need to do it. It's coming from somewhere deep inside me. And, that's the divine hand in our earth plane, sort of guiding the next step. We all feel we're at a crossroads, helping humanity with, the changes that are coming in the coming centuries. And there is an awakening. There is, this knowledge of what we really are is coming back into the light slowly.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I think. So how did you get interested?
It's a long story, but the short version of it is that the reason I do the work is because my own personal curiosity on not just near-death experiences, but the totality of all aspects of spirituality and of our spiritual growth. So that's why I talk to channelers and mediums and psychics and quantum physicists and, ancient civilization experts and all these different realms all lead to the same thing. They all cross-pollinate. And I think it's something that first interests me, but also I believe that it creates a tremendous amount of peace and comfort to a lot of people around the world. And that's one of the main reasons I do this. When I started, it was curiosity, and I was like, hey, maybe 5 people will listen, maybe 10 people will listen, who knows? And now we're in the millions and growing, and you're like, oh, this work is important. And you hear things back from people. You're like, you're changing my life. I was atheist, now I'm not. It's part of what I'm supposed to be doing here for my personal journey. It is my purpose to do it here, to be this forum that I'm creating for people like yourself to come in and not only reach a few hundred people, but to reach millions of people who are very like-minded and are curious about all of this. So that's the main reason I'm doing it. And I agree with everything you're saying as far as there is an awakening. We are being prepared for something in the future. And I think we're all kind of decompressing. Like we've been down in the trench underwater and we're slowly coming up. Like if we go up too fast, we're going to get the bends. So this is the process. This is the process of this awakening. And 5 years ago, this show wouldn't do as well as it is doing now. 10 years ago, would have barely had a crawl. And let's not even say farther back. So there's a timing thing as well. I started the show 2 years ago, right towards the tail end of COVID, kind of like a little bit over, we were over halfway through with COVID when this started. And it's changed my life. And I think it's changed the lives of millions of people around the world. So that's the short answer. The long answer is much longer. So, Bill, let me ask you something, Bill. A lot of people who watch these or hear about these, by the way you told the story, man, it sounds like a dream. I'm going to be devil's advocate here for a second.
Good,
man. It just sounds like a dream. You conked out, you conked open. You had this really lucid dream, and you think you went to the other side. And it just sounds like a really lucid dream. What would you say to someone saying that to you?
Well, I'll say it to you because you just told me all about peace and comfort that you're bringing to millions. And the other side is nothing but love and kindness and patience and sweetness. And all those rough emotions, they're here, but they don't go with us. So that other side, if you're ready to look, if you're ready to say, you know, what's going on here and how can I do better? Then you'll start seeing, the messages from guys like you. And there, I know you're from the film industry. These messages are in the film industry.
Oh yeah.
If your audience watches that movie Astral City, you'll be shocked at the parallels. There's a heavenly realm, there's an in-between, there's an earth realm, there's a other place, and they're all shown very clearly in that movie. And you're gonna love this. My story, I've just realized in the last couple of years that in the Wizard of Oz, Dorothy lives in a black and white world, kind of drab, not a lot going on, some mean people, harming animals and things. And she gets caught up in the twister. She goes up in the cabin. Something happens. A window comes off, hits her in the head, and she falls on the bed and she peels away. This lighter version of her peels away, and she's in a near-death experience. And when the cabin lands, she opens the door, and there's these beautiful giant colored flowers and these beautiful, greens. Everything's in full color. And there are these giggling munchkins that are hiding around in all this color and all this beauty. And they come forward to her in groups of 3, with the Lollipop Guild. And, yeah. And those are my favorite. Mm-hmm. And, that they had that same sort of playful, joyful thing that the guys I saw, that was the feeling I got. And then the little dancers and the politicians. And when she's ready, Glinda comes. Glinda shows up, arrives in a beautiful orb, colors, and has a beautiful soul, and is interacting sweetly with Dorothy, and gets her on the road, gets her on her journey. And Glinda always shows up when Dorothy gets into trouble with the witch or whatever. Glinda shows up along the way, and Dorothy gets these 3 characters that travel with her. The straw man looking for a brain, and the tin man looking for a heart, and the lion looking for courage. And the story I get is that the story that comes clearly to me is that when we learn to use our right brain and reconnect with the divine of sweetness and kindness, live our life from that divine mind and make every decision from the intelligence of the heart, and to move forward without fear, with courage, then we get to go home. And there's no place like home.
And the power is always within you. She always had the power to go home whenever she wanted to.
Right on, Alex. Isn't that awesome?
That's a really great analogy for that movie. And I always find it fascinating. This is I love talking about this subject, is media in general, stories, movies, books. They show up and move humanity forward in a way. So when H.G. Wells started doing his books, the concepts that he talked about in those books, which did not exist prior to him, 60 years later, we're on the moon. We have a space program. We have other things like that. All of these, because they were inspired by those stories. How many scientists and quantum physicists have we been inspired by Star Wars or Star Trek, or The Matrix, or these kind of films that really open up our our mind. Like a movie like The Matrix could not have come out in 1939 when Wizard of Oz came out, not only for the technical limitations, but the story would have been just so beyond anybody's comprehension. But I mean, H.G. Wells was pretty much beyond anybody's comprehension when it came out. But when the right time is right, these stories find their way into the zeitgeist. And now more than now, I had a guest the other day say Marvel's doing a great job with the multiverse, the idea of the multiverse, multiple dimensions, parallel realities. That's in the zeitgeist now. These are very common phrases, which before were talked only by, dark cornered quantum physicists in a party somewhere, who the other quantum physicists looked at like, oh God, he's talking about the multiverse again, kind of stuff. So it's pretty fascinating how this is all starting to unravel. And shows like this, these ideas are being shown to millions now.
Yeah, I'm glad you went that full circle, because it comes all the way back to right now, what we're seeing with the podcasts and that inspiration. Hollywood isn't some dark boogeyman that's putting these movies out. That, this inspiration is coming, I think, from a divine source. And just like you deciding, hey, I'm going to put together this whole thing with this podcast, and this is going to be the format. H.G. Wells said, I'm going to write this book, and this is where it's going to go. And it, for your guests, that there is a divine angels and guides and ancestors. They're all around us all the time, and we're being nudged, and everything is in wonderful hands. Mm-hmm. And like you said, the next goal is us understanding that there are, these incredible dimensions. They're just a frequency away, and they're all around us. And we're not alone in the universe, like, the mainstream says. Quite the contrary. It's an incredible universe full of, diverse life.
You, when you kind of came out of your near-death experience, when you came out of where you were sick, you became better. It sounded like the moment you came out, you started talking about this, is what you said. You told anybody who would listen. You went back and told the boys, everybody, hey, this is what happened. So you weren't ever, quote unquote, in the closet. The NDE closet is what I like to call it. You came out really quickly, but then you got shoved back in to the closet for 15 years because your surrounding world, maybe some accepted it, but many didn't. And if you were going to keep your job, you needed to shut your hole, or else it just wasn't going to happen. And when I heard that, I was like, this is a bunch of, burly firefighters, a lot of testosterone in the room. I can't be hearing about short little guys. That's not I get it. But when you got kind of pushed back into that closet, and it sounds like it was self-imposed, you shut the door, and you were there for 15 years quietly dealing with this. How did you deal with it psychologically? Because there's so many near-death experiences I speak to who suffered so much by not being able to share their stories. And then what was it that got you out of that closet?
Well, I think these are great questions. I think that deep down inside, I wasn't taking Bill seriously anymore, because I'd seen life without him, and I was still me. And, I wasn't too proud of a lot of parts of him. And I definitely didn't like the whole human being thing, the whole, we're in constant judgment. We have all these bias, and we got to be right. And, all that stuff dropped away. And so, yeah, I didn't take Bill too seriously, and I didn't react to the situation here that, the NDEs are kooks, and mm-hmm. I was at the top of the kook pile with my story.
Mm-hmm.
And so I left it alone. And, thankfully it came, with Straussman's book and some of the things I did, it came roaring back. And here we are today.
So what was there a catalyst for you to say, I need to start telling my story? What was the catalyst for that?
Yeah, I was a happy retiree, riding bikes and playing in bands and running trails with my dogs. And all of a sudden the Straussman video showed up, and then I bought the book. And when I got to chapter 13 and 14 and saw those little guys described, and the feelings that his volunteers had, for these guys, I put the book down and I walked around for a week going, what is going on in this place? I had my funny little thing that happened, but he can reproduce this with this DMT. He's reproducing, they're going to this facility, they're seeing these beings. And I remember after I read the book a couple of times, I sat down and I go, this is the most significant book that's probably been written in the last 10,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think you said earlier that, there is a doorway and people can go through it. I don't recommend it, because, I've done the ayahuasca thing, and it's, that can be a brutalizing night, because you're trying to escape this earthly self's opinion. And, it may take hours for you to surrender to the softer voice that other you that's waiting for you to figure him out.
It sounds, from my experience from studying and speaking to people who've taken psychedelics, I've never partaken, but from what I understand, it can be a very violent journey from this point to the other. Whereas when I've spoken to yogis and gurus and swamis from India or from other parts, the way they present it is like, well, if you do it this way, it's you don't get the bends. It's a very slow, you're decompressing over years to be able to then, once you get to where you're going, jump in and out whenever you want. That's when you start becoming, your vibration gets higher, your frequency gets higher. But these psychedelics, they'll run you through, but again, I've said this before on the show, and I'll say it again. It's one of the great quotes from the Maharishi, who said, what do you think about these kind of, because it was the 60s, so, everything was going around, the psychedelic psilocybin and all that stuff, acid and stuff. And he's like, well, taking acid or psilocybin is kind of like taking a sledgehammer to a wall to get the sunlight to come in, where meditation is placing a window in that wall. And I was like, that sounds right, because it's, and what you're saying too, it's like, it is pretty violent, and you're kind of like almost being yanked. Like, you're doing something. Another yogi told me, it's like you're going into a room that you weren't invited into.
That's right.
Right. It's like you were invited into it because you died and came back, which also, to be fair, can be a violent situation. I've had many on the show. And you said something really interesting. You said that you were on the top of the kook pile. To be fair, Bill, your story is a little bit more outside, if this is even possible, a little bit more outside the norm of a near-death experience that I've again spoken to over 100 now. I mean, Jesus didn't show up. You didn't have a traditional life review. But the thing that I find fascinating is that your experience, and every near-death experience that I've had, that I've spoken to, one point or another, all say something similar. There's nothing but love. There's nothing but peace. The characters might change in that story, but that is always and they all come back different. They all come back changed. And yeah, there are some that go through a hellish experience, and they later tell me that, like, I had to, because I was Catholic, I had to go through that because I felt that I needed to go through that in order to find the pearly gates. But I wanted to kind of put that out there for people, because your story is like these little guys. I'm like, okay, great. who are these little guys? What's going on? I've never heard of them, but yet everything sounds, there's a familiarity to it all from my experience from this point of view, sir.
That's cool. That's cool to hear. You're the man.
So let me ask you, how did your family deal with this? I mean, because it's one thing to stop telling your bros, but when you're, like your wife, your parents, and people really close to you, was it something that was just not talked about, or what?
My family wasn't, my mom and dad, and sisters and stuff. That's who wasn't going to be talked about. And they're all wonderful people and stuff, but there was nowhere to go with it. And my wife, over the years, I would wake up giggling and talking in some nonsensical language and laughing, and she would go, "What is going on with you with this? You're talking to somebody." And I'm like, "There's like these guys. I really can't see them, but they're right nearby, and in that sweet spot for sleeping and dreaming and waking, that connection to the divine. These guys are around." And so she knew something was real. And, I really didn't run off the rails too many times in our 50 years together. Mm-hmm. So she knew that this was a real thing that was part of me. And, back in the day, every few years, in order to help out, I would, like one time she had this robe, and I said, "That robe, you look exactly with that light, you're silhouetted. You look exactly like those guys." And so we set it up. There was a light curtain. And then, so I took 3 pictures of her, and, and we put them all together, and one of them was turning to the other two. And I'm like, that's what I saw, and this was 20 years ago or more. And, so that picture hung around for a long time, and, she's been supportive, cooperative, entertained by it.
Do you dream about them, or do you meditate, or do you see them if you do meditate, do you see them in the meditations? Do you dream, and do they come back and talk to you? How do you still have communications with them?
Not with them specifically, but this meditation thing, you were talking about the power of that cannot be overstated. If you sit quietly in nature and still yourself and quiet your mind, plus raise your frequency with how you eat and how you think, and that veil can disappear for everyone. We can move into those other realms or experience them. And when I sit in the recliner over there, I'm an old guy, so I need a couple naps a day, and just let go. And, the vibrations start, my right side of my head starts to vibrate and tingle. And then this area gets very heavy and sleepy, and, and then these vibrations start, and, you start to move out, seemingly out of your body or inward or something, but there's lots of colors around. And then I push through that, and then you can go to the grids, and then go past the grids, and then there are these light forms, that are in the room. These, energetic beings of light, our ancestors, our friends. They're around all of us all the time. And if you quiet the beast adequately, you can reconnect with who you really are.
You said something interesting, and I'd love for you to tell me what you're doing in that sense. When you're saying raise your vibration, raise your frequency with meditation, which I've experienced that myself in my own meditation practice. But you said something, eat the right foods to raise your vibration as well. I also have experienced that as well. Can you explain to the audience what you've been doing and what kind of foods? Because I'll tack on afterwards, but I want to hear your point of view of what foods and things you're doing to kind of raise your vibration and get closer to this stuff that we're talking about.
Yeah, when in 2011, 2012, you asked me earlier about what was going on, but I started going to Costa Rica, just getting on a plane and going to Costa Rica and driving around. And it went on for 3 or 4 years. I'd get away for a couple of weeks or a few months, and the roads turned into dirt roads, turned into trails, and I started being around people who lived in villages, communes, and they did a lot of stuff with silence. It was part of the village, and intention was part of the village. The food was all food that's full of light, greens and vegetables and fruits. And, the water was water that fell to the earth and ran along Mother Earth's magnetic love and became structured water. And that's a huge part of it, because we're mostly water, to drink that structured water. And when you start following those things, I noticed with my trips, one of the trips, something opened. And I started seeing this energy climbing the walls, this bluish light. And it was on like a 5-second repeat cycle. And I'd look in the sky and I'd see, like the aurora borealis, I'd see purple and green, swirling, powerful energy. And, that's when you watch murmurations of birds and schooling fish, and the experts can't tell you, what are they doing? How are they all making the same move? Well, they're tied into that energy that's around all of us. This powerful energy. It's purple and green with the aurora borealis. And if you look at the chakras, that's, that is divine love. That is divine love coming down and organizing the play, the movie that we're in. These gravitational waves, it's all real. But yeah, that opened. I started seeing people's faces would change. Past lives would come up, animated characters talking, smiling. This shocked everybody down in that village, because how can this fireman who just showed up to this lifestyle have these amazing experiences? But again, I think that was just my path, and I somehow I honored it, and I found my way to these experiences, and it had everything to do with, and a lot of things like negative emotions, like the guy that cuts you off on the roadway. Just let him go. Let him go. He's got enough troubles. And the lady that bumped you with the shopping cart or something, just back off and say, hello, madam, I hope you have a nice day, and whatever. It just separate yourself from those low emotions that we have here, and you'll start returning to your real self. You can live a heaven on earth life. And, the Kundalini starts to move, and then everything changes.
And that's a whole other podcast for a whole other day when we start talking about Kundalini energy and all of that. I've spoken about it many times. If anyone's curious about it, they could just go into the archives and look for the word Kundalini, because that is a part of this process. It's very real. Yeah, as you're elevating and elevating your vibration to a higher frequency, your Kundalini energy starts to open up more and more and more. And eating foods that are alive, vibrant, those things. I mean, you listen to the yogis, they're not eating McDonald's, generally speaking, they're not eating that kind of food. They're eating things that are alive and fresh. And it helps because what you put into your body also has an energetic signature to it. So if you're eating things that are low energy, your energy drops. When you eat things that are high, it drops. That's why when I used to eat a nice burger at In-N-Out, it tasted good going in, and not so much about 20 minutes, 30 minutes later. I was just like, you feel.
That's true. That's me too. It's almost like a rejection.
Yeah, your body's just like, oh, I got to process all of it. And you just get so tired, and you're just like, But then you eat something that's, a little bit more alive, and you bounce it, you're bouncing and you're jumping, and your energy level is different. So, everything is energy. No question. Everything is energy. Everything is frequency. And the more I talk to people like yourself and, quantum physicists from Yale and Harvard and Oxford and all over the world, and start talking about these kind of ideas, it's just so fascinating how the old, ancient text and the new, quantum physics and those kind of principles are starting to match up. And we're having the open conversations about it in public for anybody in the world to watch whenever they want. So it's a really interesting time to be alive, Bill. That's for sure.
Yeah, it is. It is that ancient knowledge is coming back. And, that the conference on procession and ancient knowledge, that's next week down in Palm Springs. That's a good one.
Nice.
I mean, Graham Hancock will be there and Robert Grant. These guys, if you're paying attention, if you're drawn to them, you can get a lot of answers about, how things are going here and this whole cycle of how we're climbing back to a golden age. And, there's nothing to be fearful of at all.
Agreed. Now, Bill, I'm going to ask you a few questions to ask all of my guests. What is your definition of living a fulfilled life?
A fulfilled life for me, to look upon all life, all others, as the divine being that they really are. That they're having this earthly experience. We're all having it together, and to be kind to somebody else's experience, help where you can. And, I did it with my whole life with the firefighter thing, the service to others. And I mean, life is just a blast when you're in service to others, and you have this reverence and respect for all life forms, trees and rocks, even.
Fair enough.
This is a beautiful gift. And yeah, the human thing is it's kind of a big false narrative, that we got to get the job and the girl and the car and it's a false narrative.
Yeah, it's a video game, but you can't take seriously that you're Mario and there's really no Donkey Kong coming after you. Now, if you had a chance to go back in time and talk to little Bill, what advice would you give him?
Keep going strong, bro. I think that you have to look and say the path was, divinely scripted. When you watch that, talking about movies, you watch that movie, The Adjustment Bureau, that we have a path, and, we may not intersect with a big challenge, but it'll come again. So I would, be tempted to tell little Bill, hey, there's something going on with you. A near-death experience is an invitation, and it's an invitation to a soul that has, picked up some mileage, picked up some energy that's positive. And so I'd be tempted to tell little Bill, hey, you got something, there's something special about you. Get a little more serious about the meditation and these people that sit quietly and look at the world differently and slow down. Because, for 30 years, I was doing Ironmans and, all the training that, I was constantly churning, swimming at 5 a.m. and running at lunch and bicycling after work. And I was constantly churning. And I had my chart read once, and it said, you have this incredible amount of cosmic energy in your chart. You've got like this cosmic triangle. And I said, well, that explains why, I'm 65 years old and I'm running for an hour and a half. When most of my friends are like, dude, I can't even get out of the recliner. And so yeah, that energy was there, but I don't know. Maybe Little Bill could have directed it towards things like you looked into early in life.
Now, how do you define God or source?
Source energy, I think that big ball of fire in the sky is a lot closer to source than we've been led to believe. There's a book, The Real History of the World, and he says that big ball of that the sun in the sky is really a doorway. It's a portal back to where we really come from. And it comes by, it passes by every day, and the plants grow and we get wood from it, and we can stay warm while it's not here. And, everything goes back. When we talk about source, everything goes back to that big ball of fire in the sky. And without it, everything ceases here. So yeah, it's that, and it's all those other things. It's just this expanded that we're all part of.
And what is the ultimate purpose of life?
The ultimate purpose of life is to be kind and to help others. And when your parents get old, it's to drop everything you want to do, even though you're young and healthy, and be there for them. Most of us don't. My mom went through this place, and there was 80 people in there, and I was the only one that was there every day. They'd come on the weekends or holidays and stuff, but that walk your ancestors home.
Beautiful. That's beautiful. Beautiful. And where can people find out more about you and the work that you're doing in the world?
I'm not really out there. They can email me. That's, I'm bletson56@gmail.com. But I don't have a website or anything like that.
So you're not selling a book. Everyone always says, they're just doing this to sell books. You're not doing this to sell books. So not that you get rich by selling books, by the way. I don't know about you.
No, you don't. You don't. And we're programmed to believe that we are, that is something has value, then it has monetary value. And if you sell a lot of it, then you're a bestseller, and now you have more value and
important. Yeah.
And I stay away from it. I stay away from any bucks coming my way. And, Jesus, there's only one time Jesus got pissed off, and he went back to Jerusalem with his followers, went into the temple, and there was all this stuff, people selling things, and he flipped out. He turned the tables over, and he lost his cool because there was money changers in the temple. And we're not supposed to be doing this. This life here on earth is a temporary gig. It's over in a few heartbeats. I was 15 2 weeks ago.
Oh, me too, brother. Me too. I was just sitting down watching Saturday morning cartoons just yesterday. So I completely understand what you're saying. And do you have any parting messages for the audience, Bill?
The NDE thing is popular right now, and we're all celebrities apparently, but we're really not special. We're not. There's nothing special or unique about us. We just had an NDE and we somehow remembered it. And so that the NDE and the drinking the ayahuasca and the deep trance-like meditation, these things can take you out of the illusion of this world and back to who you really are. NDE is kind of out of the question, and the ayahuasca, that's sort of a forced NDE, to be honest with you. And, it leaves the meditation is sit quietly and take care of your body, and you can reconnect with who we really are.
Bill, I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your amazing story and wisdom that you've picked up along the way in this life. So I appreciate you, my friend. Thank you again so much.
I appreciate you, Alex. Thanks very much.
Thanks for watching. Click on one of the videos below to continue your journey, and don't forget to subscribe.